My name is Tessa. I'm 30 years old, and my ex-boyfriend tried to urinate on his cousin's coffin at the funeral, right after I confessed I had slept with the deceased. But the real chaos didn't begin until his family read the eulogy. Let me explain. I dated Ryan for 3 years. He was the definition of charming on the outside, rot on the inside. The kind of man who could convince your friends he was perfect while casually destroying you behind closed doors. Never physical, just mental warfare. Gaslighting, manipulation, guilt trips. The works. He had a cousin named James. James was different. Quiet. Observant. Soft-spoken. He wasn't flashy, like Ryan. He didn't command a room, he watched it. They'd grown up close, but something had clearly fractured between them in recent years. Ryan never told me why. Just called him a washed-up loser and changed the subject. I first met James at Ryan's family barbecue. I remember it vividly because he was the only one who asked me questions that weren't superficial. He wanted to know what I read, where I grew up, what scared me. It wasn't flirty, just genuine. But I saw something in his eyes. A restraint. Like he was biting his tongue every time Ryan interrupted or touched me too roughly when he thought no one was looking. Over the next few months, I saw James a handful of times at family events. Always the same. Quiet concern in his eyes, brief moments of kindness, and then distance. I started thinking about him more than I should have. Then came the night of Ryan's business trip. I was staying at his place, and James came by to drop off some old boxes. We ended up talking for hours. Wine. Music. Honesty. He told me Ryan used to bully him when they were kids, pushed him downstairs, blamed him for things he didn't do, humiliated him in front of girls. And suddenly, everything made sense. We kissed. Then we didn't stop. It only happened once. But it mattered. Because it wasn't about sex, it was about seeing clearly for the first time. And feeling seen. James sent me one message after. I'm not sorry, but I won't ruin your life. Goodbye. And I never heard from him again. 2 months later, he was dead. Motorcycle accident. Single vehicle. No drugs. No alcohol. Just gone. Ryan cried. I didn't. The funeral was closed casket. Dozens of people gathered in black, some crying, some whispering about what a waste it was. I stayed near the back, unnoticed. I hadn't planned to say anything. I wasn't even supposed to be there. But then Ryan started drinking. Not discreetly, openly, loudly. Flasks in his jacket. Slurring his words. Muttering that James deserved it. That he was a snake. That the world was better off. Then, in the middle of the quiet viewing, he stood up, stumbled toward the casket, and fumbled with his belt. I'm not kidding. He was actually trying to unzip and urinate on his cousin's coffin. Gasps. Screams. His aunt fainted. His mother shrieked. 2 uncles dragged him away. The priest threatened to call the police. It was a circus. I should have left. Instead, I stood up and walked to the front. Excuse me, I said. I'd like to say something. People turned, wide-eyed. I hadn't even introduced myself to most of the family. I stood at the pulpit, hands shaking, pulse thundering, and I told the truth. I was Ryan's girlfriend, but James was the only man in that family who ever looked at me like I was a human being. We spent one night together. One honest, quiet night. And I've never forgotten it. Dead silence. I looked right at Ryan, who was now sobbing in the arms of his mother. You want to know why he tried to desecrate the coffin? I said, voice firm. Because James made him look small. Not with fists. With decency. With silence. With the kind of character Ryan never had. I stepped down. People didn't clap. They didn't scream. They just looked. And then James's sister, a woman I'd never met, walked up to the podium, pulled a folded piece of paper from her coat, and said, There's something you should all hear. This is the eulogy James wrote for himself. That's right. He had written one. Weeks before he died. She read it aloud. It talked about fear. About abuse. About being broken down. And quietly rebuilding. About betrayal. About a woman who reminded me what kindness felt like. About choosing to die with dignity, even if the world never knew why. And then the final line. If Ryan ever cries at this funeral, tell him it's not grief. It's exposure. Everyone turned to look at him. He bolted. Out the doors. Down the steps. Gone. But here's the twist. A week later, I received an envelope in the mail. No return address. Inside was a letter. In James's handwriting. Tessa, if you're reading this, it means I finally got off that ride. Don't blame yourself. That night gave me something I never had growing up. One moment of truth. It made the rest of it bearable. I wasn't afraid anymore. Thank you for giving me peace. Even just once. That was enough. Live your life loud. Not hidden like mine. And never let men like Ryan write your ending. James. I cried for an hour. Not because I felt guilty. Because I finally felt free. Ryan moved away after the funeral. No one talks about him anymore. I heard he tried to get into therapy. I hope he stays there. As for me, I kept the letter, framed it, and I read it every year on the date of James's death. Not because he died, but because that's the day I started living.